Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 165th edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And I'm delighted to say that Frank, because Stan's not here, I'll explain to you in a minute why he's not here. We're joined by Carolyn Eyre again. Hello, Carolyn.
Oh, good morning.
Yeah, you're in sort of rather damp Dordogne.
Yeah, I am. It's been we've been here since Sunday. I think it's rained every day so far. It's
Wow.
brightened up a little bit for this morning, but the light's going to come in and out, I think, as
Oh,
the
is it
clouds
right?
go
Right.
past.
Well, I've just come back from a week in Mallorca, which has been a real treat with my wife, and we had very nice weather, very sunny. I think we only had about 1 minute of rain, so it's
Excellent.
been a lovely week. But back
Cheers.
on it today. I'm actually engaged in doing an evaluation of the summary reports that are done on multi academy trusts. I did this for an organisation last year, and I'm going to update it today to see what they're finding. And I heard also that Ofsted today or yesterday announced that they're not going to do any more until April because they apparently don't have the resource to do it. So, yeah.
Mm.
Anyway, so we'll see what that produces. But the reason why Stan isn't here is that his daughter Helen is getting married to Gavin O'Brien today. So it's their big wedding day, and I have to say I saw Stan last night. He's got this sort of nasty cough that he can't quite get rid of, and of course he's got his speech to give today. So I wish him well, and I'm sure everybody that follows us will do the same. So it's just Carolyn and me today, but Stan will be back with us next week. So I thought I'd kick off if that's all right. Oh, just explain to people briefly. Sorry, who are you? Because there may be people that haven't watched the video before or the podcast, so they'll be thinking, well, who is Carolyn Eyre? So
Okay.
just give us a little summary as to the sort
Yeah.
of work you do.
Okay, so I'm an independent safeguarding consultant. I work nationally with local authorities, large multi-academy trusts, very small, very small trusts. I spend most of my time in the in the special school sector with NAS, which is the National Association of Independent and Non-Maintained Special Schools. I audit, I do a lot of training, a lot of DSL support, a lot of supervision now, and then complex disciplinaries, investigations, and inquiries.
So
So
before all
busy.
that, I think you worked in Leeds, didn't you? I think that's how
Yeah,
we
so
got to
I
know
was
each other.
I was the head of safeguarding for Leeds for quite a lot of years. Um, and then sort of in the latter years of the role, became head of health, safety and well-being. So that brought the child protection and the health and safety together under one banner.
Right.
So all the asbestos. If I was still there now,
Oh
I
God.
suppose I would be dealing with the aerated
Oh,
concrete.
would you?
So, so very
Okay.
relieved I left.
Yeah, yeah.
Although interestingly, I'm the chair of trustees of I think the only setting in Leeds that's got this aerated concrete,
Oh no.
and
Oh
it's a
God.
nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. All the stuff they say about all the support you have and the porter cabins, it's not
It's
right.
not. It's not
That's not
there.
how, that's not what's happening. So yeah, it was a big role. But I left Leeds 11 years, 12 years ago, and
And
have been
and
doing this
I
ever
we
since.
we got to know each other because I was aware of the fact that the trust that I was running really was very much relying on individuals to be responsible for the safeguarding in their individual schools. So I was worried that there may be sort of practice or gaps in provision. So I asked Carolyn to come and do some audit work, and then she did some training work for us there as well. So yeah, that's how I know Carolyn. I don't think you do the work anymore for that trust. Is that correct? Or do
No, you got too big, Frank. The trust got too big,
you?
and I think there was a point where I said to you, Frank, you need to actually employ a safeguarding manager,
Yes.
and that was what happened. So although I do provide some supervision still for that trust, and if there's a complex case, then yes, I'll do I'll do a piece of work with them. But I noticed that person that was appointed while through that conversation, she just won colleague of the year at their MAT
Oh,
awards.
fabulous.
So,
Oh, well, that's
so that was a good appointment.
good
Well
point.
done.
Well, thank you in your the work you did there because it was really, I mean, some of it was reassuring, but other bits of it weren't quite so reassuring. But it's best to know, isn't it? Best to know.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And when we're talking, last time I was on, we were talking about audits, and I was saying about my horror of dummy inspections, people coming in and saying, oh, you need to change all this, or, oh, that's all great. And then actually an inspection, that's not necessarily, what comes out of it. So so that was how we talked about me coming back at some point and talking culture, but I'm going to save that for when I've got
Well, say
staff.
that because we will have Carolyn back. We may actually get onto it today because some of the points that Carolyn's going to mention, I think, probably do embrace some elements of culture. But anyway, let me start by saying what's caught my eye this week. Well, I haven't been sitting on the sunbed. I read Rory Stewart's new book about At the Edge of Politics, which I really enjoyed, and it sort of gives you an insight into things that you thought were bad anyway, but they were proved in a sense by reading the book. And then also I read a book that hasn't been published yet by my brother, who's been a guest here. And that's I really have to say I really enjoyed that book. But while I was doing all of that, I actually thought about a school that I know that's gone into special measures for the first time in a really tough community. And I was thinking about some of the teachers, some of the leaders that I know quite well in that school, who actually could easily walk into a job in a different town, a different sort of school, but have chosen to commit their not quite their career, but commit a significant part of their career to that school. I was trying to find words that sort of captured how I felt about those individuals, because some of them are, some have been guests here, some I've worked with and seen in classrooms, some I've seen doing CPD. These are really talented, highly skilled individuals, and they, to be honest, they'd walk into a job in another secondary school somewhere else, but they've chosen to stick with that community. And by gum, regardless of the special measure judgment, I have to say that I would be more than happy for any of my children to be taught by those individuals, and it's something about how did I feel about them? Well, I did feel sort of tremendous level of respect, admiration as well for their
Mm.
dogged determination to stick with it. There was a little bit of gratitude in there as well, which I didn't feel as though that was quite the right word. And I have to say, I've really struggled to capture how I feel about it. But there is this sort of thing that sits with it as well. That's a little bit of, because they do that, I don't think they're actually valued to the way that they ought to by the profession. And so when you look at, I noticed the Pearson Awards, teaching awards are coming up. I suspect that it would be quite hard for one of those colleagues. I hope not, but I suspect it is, to win a Pearson Award at the moment. When actually, when I look at the work that they do, I think that we all as a profession need to be grateful because in effect, no one else is applying for those posts. There's a significant problem now in getting people to work in that school because of that judgment. But they are sticking with it, and that community needs them to stick with it. And we all teachers, anybody involved in teaching, there needs to be, deepest respect for the fact that they are sticking with it and not just running away. Because there has been problems with since that judgment. There has been a bit of hemorrhaging going on, and but we do need those really, really talented individuals to stick there. So I'm just really wanted to thank them for doing it, but still struggling to find that word.
Yes, there is some. It makes me think of a couple of schools in Leeds in years gone by, which probably had very similar intakes, and you wondered sometimes. I would wonder, how did people keep going to work and keep and keep any sense of aspiration for the school, for the children. And there's something in some of those schools, it's a real commitment to the community, isn't it? It's a really clear belief that these children can achieve and that these children deserve to have the best teachers. I mean, I don't know, I'm supporting a school at the moment which has had a fairly nightmare inspection, and the commitment from senior leaders to getting it right is immeasurable. I wouldn't work with an organisation that I didn't believe cared, but it has a cost. The cost to those individuals to keep going to work, to keep believing that they're better than a report says they are.
Yes. Yes.
As individuals, they're better than that report.
Yeah, I mean, emotion, yeah, psychologically, I mean, I think we forget sometimes, don't we? That it's very easy to think about, oh, well, they go to work as if the work bit is where they experience all that sort of angst. But actually, it sits with them while they're having their tea. It's part of their conversation. If they have a partner or whatever, it's part of that conversation. It often sort of lingers and stops you from sleeping, getting to sleep. It's these sorts of things. And I remember speaking to a member of staff recently who has chosen to move into a very senior position, and it's really outside her comfort zone. There's a lot of training that she's going to require to sort of to take on that role, but she's been at the school, I think, 15 years or so. She's very talented. It's in a subject area that is in great short supply, but she's stuck with it. I just thought you truly are an amazing individual, to do this, when it'd be so easy just to walk away and go to a probably a more advantaged school, perhaps where there's less stress during the day, but yeah, so that's that. During my time, my relaxation, I was thinking about those members of staff. I mean, yeah, I mean, we in the trust that I led, we focused in on sort of schools that were in some of the more challenging communities. I think when I left, there was only one that perhaps wasn't. And actually, I sort of, it's in a way sort of didn't cloud my judgment, but sometimes you have to sort of you have to take into account some element of the context while still wanting to have the highest levels of ambition for individual teachers, pupils, and the school overall. At times that was quite difficult for a CEO, I think, to know, how do I manage it? Is the context getting in the way of my sort of judgment making, my thinking about the scenario, the situation?
Mm.
It's hard, particularly when you've got a lot of schools in those sorts of situations. To sort of continue to sort of think about, well, is this really good enough? Am I part of the problem because I'm not actually pushing hard enough? Yeah.
That fits in with something that Shaheen was talking about when Shaheen was talking about the impact on senior leaders, and you picked her up on something. Oh, she was talking about people being depleted.
Oh,
And
that's
you
right.
sort of, and you said, oh, that's an interesting word. And I thought, gosh, yes, so many of the DSLs that I work with, particularly in supervision, they're depleted all of the time. And I think for a school like the one that you've just described in the Northwest, there's also probably going to be that sense of just needing to find more all the time, needing to find more. And it fits in with something that I do in supervision training around vicarious trauma. And when you're working with children who've experienced abuse, children who've been neglected, children who've experienced trauma in their lives, and you're working in a community where the parents may also be traumatized, and the parents are facing so many challenges, and they don't know where the next meal is going to come from. And then all of that is coming into school, and the staff are trying to support and nurture and wrap care around that child and that child's family and that community. And then that's being passed up towards the safeguarding staff. And then in an ideal world, the DSL needs to be able to pass on that vicarious trauma to keep themselves safe. So that goes to the head teacher. And then head teachers are left holding all of this emotion
Yes. Yes.
for their community. And then, all the trauma and challenges that staff may have in their own lives. And I just thought, oh yeah, depletion is really that's a really
That's a
interesting.
very, very interesting concept, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, what's caught your eye this week then?
Oh, for me, it's nothing to do with education. It's the environment. I'm not particularly known for my commitment to green, to green ideas, but the Royal British Legion have launched the first new poppy design in a whole generation. I mean, it's like 28, 30 years or something since they last changed it. And it's taken them 3 years to develop a plastic-free poppy, which is being launched this week. So the entire thing is made of paper and is completely recyclable. And and I thought, I mean, they said there'll be all the old stock still to get rid of, but to to spend that much time developing something which doesn't have little bits of plastic in it
Wow.
is a commitment,
Just for
isn't
a
it?
very
So
small item as well, you know.
indeed, yes. So it's only the seventh time apparently in the history of the poppy that it has been redesigned.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I'm getting back into the holiday I just had. During the afternoon, we would go and get an ice cream from an ice cream stall, and then we always got a tub. And but the tub also had a spoon, and I thought, oh, this is terrible. It's a plastic spoon. Until I looked on it, and the spoon was rock hard. You know, it was difficult to bend and twist, but it said compostable on it.
Uh,
And then you think, oh well, you know, it looked like plastic, it felt like plastic, you know, but it wasn't plastic, you know, or if it was a certain type of plastic. I don't know whether it's compostable, but whatever material they'd used was compostable. So yeah, it's amazing. It's symbolic, isn't it? Really, it's
yeah,
symbolic. Uh,
the little wins.
yes, the little wins.
You know, the little wins are the things that will make a difference to
Now, I saw a
generations.
tweet from you about 2 months ago,
Okay.
um, and it talked about sort of some significant changes in the safeguarding arrangements for schools that were coming down the line. And I have to say, as I said to you before, I'm completely unaware of these. So you're going to take me, and I hope some of the people who are watching or listening, through some of these changes to give them a better insight into what is coming. So it's over to you, Carolyn.
Oh, okay. The so yeah, I think the tweet that you had commented on was the conference organizers had talked about me telling the in the keynote in the workshop about the monster coming over the hill. And it
Yes.
was because, when you see the darts on the television, and each darts player has got a theme tune, and they come out, and and there's some big rock piece banging in the background and everyone's cheering. I decided that I wanted to start my workshop with a clip of music, and I chose Monster, because because the next 2 or 3 months is going to be rocky. There are so many new bits of guidance coming out, and so that was why Monster coming over the hill was in the tweet. But yeah, this is there's
Do
not
people
been.
know about this?
No, I don't think so.
No.
No, no. Judging from people's faces at the conference,
I know, I was just thinking,
absolutely not.
what? Yeah.
Absolutely not. But there's, I mean, there are six big pieces of work that are going to influence us all. Um, so it starts tomorrow with new criminal record rules.
Right.
What information is shared on DBS certificates is changing on a Saturday. I don't know why they've brought something in on a Saturday, but anyway, they have. So that's the start of it. And then in mid-November, the government have said they're going to publish the outcome of the call for evidence for the piece of legislation, mandatory reporting. So this idea that professionals who fail to report abuse will be committing a criminal offence, not making that referral. And that was a recommendation from the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse. They said that the government should make it a criminal offence for
Right.
people that work with children not to report child sexual abuse, particularly. So the consultation, that the call for evidence was asking, so who should it apply to? Should it be people that work in regulated activity? Should it include volunteers? Should it include police officers? I thought that was
Oh,
interesting.
yeah. And also, because it could be, as you say, volunteers could be, I could just visit a school, you know, just for a few hours,
Yeah,
and witness something.
yes,
That's just,
indeed.
I mean, I might be aware of the legislation, but I suspect most people who may visit school have no idea that that this might trap them. I don't know.
No, no. Other things in the in the consultation were what should be reported. So, should it be just if you discover it happening, which would be exceptionally rare? Should it be if a child if a child says they're being abused, or if a person says I'm abusing children? Or that would be fairly obvious as a responsibility, but again, exceptionally rare. Or signs and indicators, and the signs and indicators part of it is very, very broad. So
Yes.
so they were asking for calls for evidence for that. And then should there also be, and I think this is the bit that will be interesting to see what the outcome is in November, should there also be a corporate legal duty, a bit like corporate manslaughter in health and safety legislation? So we're waiting for that. The government said they were
Oh
going to
gosh, the
publish that
corporate
on.
element of it though, Carolyn. I'm just thinking about, poor old CEOs, or
Indeed, trust
actually somebody
boards.
doesn't report something. Perhaps there was a weakness in system sharing. So we talk about cultural sort of problems
Yes,
within a particular institution. That could fall heavily onto senior leaders, couldn't it? And also onto trust boards eventually.
it could. And I think there's a specific reason why the government have asked that question, but that's also led to some of these other new statutory documents. So I'll hold that for a moment.
Right.
But yeah, the idea of a corporate duty to report, a trust board. I mean, you can already see what all the training implications could
Yes.
be for this. So that's the 15th of November, allegedly, that's going to be published, and we will know something of what the new legislation will look like. And then, whether, I mean, I wasn't sure whether there would be enough time in this Parliament for them to bring in a new
Yeah.
piece of legislation. But my guess is that they will drive it through. If they've accepted the ICSA recommendation, then
Yes.
they will drive it
Yeah,
through,
because
regardless of
you
how
wouldn't want
long.
to be seen to be somebody who, I suspect most MPs wouldn't want that to be seen as the blocking issue for them.
No, indeed.
But actually, was it only? I think they're in recess at the moment. I think there was only, was it 18 days of parliamentary debate since they went back in the summer, and there's now 11 days of recess, and there's no, well, even though Parliament goes on, it sort of tends to close down, doesn't it, during the party conferences? So the question is there enough time?
Indeed.
Um,
So I guess we'll find out something about that in mid-November, if it comes out when they've said it's going to publish.
right.
And then in December, there is new statutory guidance called Stable Homes Built on Love. And the government have told us that that will forever now be known as Built on Love. So you know how keeping children safe is KICSI and working together to safeguard children is just working together. This will just be Built on Love,
Right.
apparently.
Right.
That's what the government press release says. And that is new statutory guidance for local authorities and specifically children's services, and then all the wider children's workforce, on how we will work with children where there are safeguarding and child protection issues in future. And that's massive. I mean, the changes are phenomenal.
Can
There
you
are
give us
some
an
very,
example of how that might,
yeah.
for
So I
those who
mean,
are not?
there are very good things in it. There are also things that worry me quite a lot. So one of the things, do you remember about 3 years ago there was a documentary? I think it was Panorama, maybe a couple of years ago, the scandal of local authorities placing 16 and 17-year-old care leavers in
Yes.
unregulated places.
Yes.
16 and 17-year-olds who were looked after or who were care experienced. And some of these children were being placed in caravans or
Yeah.
houses with no fire alarms and with unvetted staff.
Yes. Yes.
So Stable Homes Built on Love, they've already introduced the requirement, but it's covered by this new document in December. All of those at the moment unregulated providers, anybody who's going to care for 16 and 17-year-old care experienced or looked after children, had from this April to start registering with Ofsted, and they have to register by Monday. And then Ofsted is going to start inspecting them next April.
Wow.
So,
Well,
so the local authorities, I mean, a lot of local authorities would never have dreamt of putting those young people
no. No.
in those settings. But the local authorities that have been will now have to make sure that anywhere they choose to put these young people is properly registered, has got the proper, facilities, and is inspected by Ofsted. So where is Ofsted going to get the extra capacity?
Well,
We don't
yeah.
know. Where are they going to find people who will know about how to inspect those
Yes,
provisions?
yes,
We don't
yes.
know. But anyway, that's a really good thing that's come out of it. And
Just I don't know if it was on the recording, but I was saying that Ofsted are stopping doing summary evaluations of multi-academy trusts. You never know where the loss of that is taking up valuable resource, whether or not there are some staff there who'd be involved in that who might need training to to undertake this sort of work. I just don't know, but the one thing for me is also we Ofsted still inspects far too often, in my view, and it doesn't inspect the things that it needs to inspect more regularly. So it ties itself up in sort of like stuff that actually has little value, but actually just says, well, we've inspected the school, and actually there needs to be a much greater focus on some key elements that we know are often weak in weak schools, and those elements highlight weaknesses elsewhere. I mean, we were talking before about culture, weren't we? But we've been advocates for very regular safeguarding reviews, and perhaps that not being undertaken by Ofsted. But that in a way is a sort of, there's a lot more intelligence out there than Ofsted's willing to accept, about whether a school or a setting is safe.
yes,
But anyway,
yes.
so that's
So that's one
three.
of the that's one of the good things that comes out of
Yeah.
built on love. The thing that is going to have an impact on schools is some of the tasks which at the moment are undertaken can only be undertaken by qualified social workers will no longer need a qualified social worker.
What are those?
So there will be unqualified social workers and lead professionals. Well, we've heard about lead professionals before. Lead professionals end up coming from the partner agencies, from schools and from health. And so the assessment of children in a wide number of cases, children who need a child in need plan, there's always been a requirement that assessment is undertaken by a social worker and that the plan is delivered, and that will no longer be a requirement.
So so just to explain to those people who are not part of that, is this where a child's been identified and then there's generally a meeting, there's some evaluation undertaken by a social worker or a group of social workers, and then there's generally bringing together everybody has a sort of contact with that family or with that child. Are we saying that those sorts of meetings are no longer going to be chaired by a social worker?
Yeah.
Right.
The local authorities will be able to make choices, but I know a number of local authorities that have been in the pilots. Some of them have employed a team of unqualified social workers. So one of the authorities really quite close to you, they have employed unqualified social workers who will do that work. But in other authorities, they're saying to a teacher, a designated safeguarding lead, or a health visitor, no, over to you.
That feels too risky. I mean, it's interesting the way the government's moving towards trying to address some clear risks in the system which seem right, and here they're stepping away. Is this primarily because of a staffing issue?
No, it isn't. I think it's come out of a number of reviews, including the McAllister review, but also learning from cases like Star Hobson and Arthur Labino Jones. Why did people not listen? Why did the local authority not listen to people that said these children are in danger? So the other thing that comes out of stable homes, so the whole premise of the title of the statutory guidance is children should be at home with their families. They should be in environments where they are loved, and we need to give parents and families a bigger voice in the child protection system. So parents will be required to have an advocate in the child protection system. Agencies must work together to identify need, all the things that we've heard for years, early identification. If we intervene quickly, it won't escalate. So that's
Right.
where that document comes from. But of course that then leads to other there are other ramifications, which is some of the other changes. One of the things that you'd be particularly interested, I think, alongside Bill on Love, there is going to be a new national framework, a social work framework standards, which local authorities must meet. And there will be a dashboard, and all local authorities will have to report their KPIs on that dashboard.
Right. Yeah.
So there'll be more scrutiny of what local authority children's services are doing
Right.
in their area and how well they're doing it. So outcomes for looked after children, outcomes of referrals, outcomes in
Well,
terms.
this is taking me back to the time when I was leading the joint area reviews,
Mhm.
which were integrated inspections of children's services, and around the Haringey case with the DCS Shoesmith, who was a former HMI, and Hammersmith, the local authority. All the local authorities have an annual review called an APA, and that actually was the APA was like an annual assessment just of data,
Yeah.
bit like a dashboard.
Mhm.
And I think I thought, oh well, that's quite good, until I actually sat down with some social care inspectors who were saying, well, you can look at this data in a particular way, and it makes the authority look as though they're really on the ball, right? But I can also give you another scenario where I look at that data in exactly this in a different way, not changing any of the numbers, which then, if I gave it to another inspector, would make it look as though they were doing really badly. So and in a way, it was around the quality of the assessments was critical. So the quality of that work. You've got somebody at your door there.
There is somebody at my door. Do you want to go around the other way?
Oh, sorry to interrupt your
That's
family
all right.
life there. But actually, is that sort of the quality of it? That was what the inspectors were telling me. That it's very easy to do the assessments and get those ticked off. But actually, if the assessments are not done well, then all you're doing is storing up problems further down the line. So I mean, I'd be interested to see how that dashboard develops. From my experience of APAs, it's fraught with danger.
Yes. Well, those two, the other thing in the national framework, as well as the dashboard and the KPIs, what we don't know at the moment is how often the local authorities will have to report on that dashboard. Some of it might be 3 months, some of it might be 6 months. But all of that is statutory from December. So we're
Wow.
getting very close now, to local authorities needing to know what it is they've got to do. But also professional standards, individual professional standards are being introduced around people's approach to working with families, people's approach to recognizing, the challenges that families will have in communities. So all of that is very close upon us, but we don't quite know what it finally looks like yet. So, and then the other two things that are coming are non-statutory advice. The information sharing guidance, which is non-statutory advice, is being completely rewritten. And that's been out for consultation. I've seen the draft. It's great. I don't think there would be any concerns there. And actually, it will make life much easier for schools, particularly when they've got a concern about a child. It gives a very strong message to local authorities, particularly to children's social care, that they can't use consent as a way to push back referrals. Oh no, you can't talk to us about this family because you haven't got consent. It makes very clear that the data protection legislation, you cannot rely on consent as a process and condition. So that will be quite a big training need for everybody who works with children and families. But I think it's great. I'm very, very pleased to see it. And then the other thing that's coming is a new Working Together to Safeguard Children 2023, which of course is statutory guidance. Now they've said they're publishing that in December. They're still referring to it as Working Together 2023, which would suggest it'll be with effect immediately. I can't believe that will happen. So I assume it's going to be with effect from the 1st of January 2024, but they've said that they will publish it in December. And the changes there, the way that schools will work with families, the way that assessments are done, the end of early help, the end of child in need processes. What we will have instead is something called Families First, which brings all of those issues together. A single assessment, which will be called a Families First assessment, which will be done by unqualified social workers.
And has this been introduced from the 1st of January?
I'm assuming it's going to be. They're still saying December, but I'm assuming it'll be the 1st
Yeah,
of
but I
January.
just know that it's going to come out on the 18th of December, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
It's going
so.
to come out on the Friday that schools close, or whatever
I
it
think
is,
so.
that Friday before the Christmas holiday.
So yeah,
So,
so
but
lots to get their head
loads
around.
of stuff, loads of stuff. The thing for me though is, you know, the number of senior leaders that are aware of these changes is probably very low.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, that's probably why I've been at a couple of conferences. I've got lots of DSL training booked in for January to, help safeguarding leads start to think through all these changes and what that means for their work. Um, the designated safeguarding leads all around the country will need to start saying to their local safeguarding children partnership or their training provider, how quickly are you going to be able to get training together for us, because we're going to be working in this
Wow.
system and we don't know about it. But also policies will need to be changed. And the DfE, a couple of years ago, the DfE changed the wording in keeping children safe just very slightly. The responsibility of proprietors and governing bodies to update the child protection policy at least annually. They added in the at least. And this is a great example of why you might not be able to wait till September 2024. The policies will have to change in January,
Yes.
February,
Right.
because if we've got different information sharing rules, if we've got a different way of assessing children in need, if we've got a different way of working with social workers, that needs to be in school policies as quickly as possible. So I'm clearing a bit of my diary just for helping people to rewrite policies, to be honest.
Wow. Gosh.
So yeah, lots coming,
Well,
lots
I knew
coming.
nothing about that.
And
If
yeah.
and I'm not obviously directly involved in leading a trust or a school now, but it's quite sort of worrying in a way that I do try and keep abreast of what's going on. I'm a trustee. I'm still involved in a number of local authorities, but actually I was completely unsighted on all of that. So I think, well, I suppose it makes the point. If you want to find out what's going on, come and listen to Carolyn Eyre on Frankie Chat and start worrying. I mean, if people wanted to know more, Carolyn, they can just reach out to you.
Yeah. Yes, I guess. I mean, a lot of the people that watch this probably already know me and already
Yeah.
have some relationship with me. So yeah, but I'm not difficult to find on Google. But you would expect, I would hope, that local safeguarding children partnerships are all aware of all this and they are already working on, so what's the provision going to look like in our city or our county from December onwards, and you would expect them to be starting to offer briefings to the agencies in their area.
Yes.
This is what our landscape is going to look like from January. I would expect, if I was still in the local authority, that's what we would be doing. We would be running briefings now saying, well, we're not quite sure about the detail, but these are the
Yes.
headlines.
Yes.
Just when we were talking about the corporate responsibility for mandatory reporting, and I said I do think that there might be a specific case. One of the things that's a little bit concerning in the draft working together, in what the government have published about the new working together and the dashboard and the professional standards and the framework, and they keep referring to a national inquiry which happened in 2022 and 2020, beginning of 2023. And the inquiry was the safeguarding of children with complex disabilities in residential care. And it's got a long title. The inquiry was looking at a broad range of circumstances, but it had all come from one specific case, which was a case of two residential special schools in Doncaster, where staff were reporting concerns that children were being abused, and senior leaders didn't believe or couldn't believe or weren't listening, and
Yes.
staff were whistleblowing and the whistleblowing wasn't working, and they went to, the regulatory bodies who didn't listen, the local authority didn't listen, and children, 108 children are estimated to have been physically and sexually abused in those two schools. So I think that the corporate responsibility bit has probably come from that.
Right. Right.
Interestingly and disconcertingly, in the government release about all these changes, they, rather than call the inquiry by its proper name, they just keep referring to it as the name of those two schools inquiry.
Right. Right.
So they're referencing that particular organization over and over again, and I think, no, use the proper name. And that
Yeah.
takes us back
Yeah.
to vicarious trauma and what it's like to be in a community or in an organization which is held up as a place which doesn't do a good job. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So we go full circle in
Yeah.
every conversation.
Well, I have to say, bearing in mind we haven't spoken, I mean, in a sense, there a lot of this works well when there's a positive culture and climate in a school or a trust. But bearing in mind, we were going to talk about that more extensively. So we have our anniversary at the beginning of May. So what I'll do, Carolyn, is I'll offer you that special
Oh,
date. And if it works well, then we'll have you talking about climate and culture with Stan when he's back. But thank you very much for joining us. And again, as Carolyn says, if you want to know more, Carolyn, as you found out, is ahead of the curve on all of this. So, just reach out to her. And if you want her specific details, you can't find them online. I'm sure they're easy to find online, but just make
yeah.
contact with me and I'll share the details with you. So thank you very much for joining us from the Dordogne.
Thank
Safe
you. And
journey
lots
back
of love to
tonight.
Stan.
Yeah, I
Lots of love
will.
to Stan and his family.
Yeah, I hope his speech goes well. That's the crucial thing
Yes.
to Stan, which
Happy
I believe is
days.
going to be a poem. So, but anyway, we'll see. But anyway, we'll
Very
see you
good.
all next week. And thank you, Caroline, for joining us. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.